All right, so thank you very much, everybody, for coming back. We've lost Callum, who I think quite reasonably has decided to go to bed, I think, probably, or go have a glass of wine or something, as he's in Australia and it's the evening time. And thanks, everybody. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit more caffeinated. This spell after the break, we're going to talk a little bit about opt-out consent, a little bit about training materials to help you run the trial at your site, and then a little bit about the technical aspects and next steps going forward from Elizabeth and the trial team. So to start with, I'm going to hand you over to Isa, who is one of the co-investigators on this trial and is a very experienced neonatal nurse and research nurse at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. Thanks very much. Isa, over to you.
Thank you so much, and good morning and good evening, everyone. So I'm just gonna talk about the opt-out local experience, and you can see in the background of this picture our lovely team that was on the prematurity day. They really engage and involve also in research, which I'm pleased to work with that amazing team. So the opt-out consent model came to our practice for the first time a few years ago when we were implementing the WIT pilot study. So it's kind of novel approach for many of us, and I would like to share the experience from our local floor. So we are level 3 medical and surgical unit, and we are having over 150 babies born below 34 weeks of gestation each year. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this local practice, so what is happening, and that's what we are taking from the WIT pilot study, and now also continue with the pilot trial and along with other studies which we are running, which is FIT1 and Dolphin as well. So we're delivering the parental information leaflet at the time of admission, usually when we're approaching parents coming to us, at least that, and we're also updating mom within first 24 hours. That's the time when we are including the research element into this admission pack. Obviously, there's a situation when the staff is not around, I mean the research team facility is not around, then this task is delegated to either the nurse in charge or the doctors who are around on duty. So for the convenience of the staff, we created the study packages where they are available on the unit, and they are separated in the boxes so they can always grab the package and straight away go to the parents with the all information at hand. It's quite basically handy stuff to do if we do know that we're not always at the time on the unit. So as I said already, the first person in contact who is updating about the baby condition, it could be the nurse who is on the bedside, doctor, and if that's the time when we are on the research, we also align with the team and we screening those babies. So some of you, whenever you are having more advanced EPR system, the electronic patient record might be also in the good position of having that notification from your electronic service, which is gonna let you know that patient is eligible for some specific trial. We don't use that at the moment at Chelsea Westminster Hospital, but we are using Cerner, which is having power trial option, however, not implemented on neonatal unit yet. Although the Badger is having notification, as you already know from the WIT trial, which is also quite helpful when we're looking for the patient record. So the conversation is usually that we are giving the leaflet to the parents, giving them a little bit of time to read and digest this information, and then we making that documentation on the patient EPR, either a paper or electronic record, to make sure that the information leaflet was delivered and the staff who is going to take over about that baby will be notified. So just also very helpful and handy from the WIT trial experience were the code cards. As we know, sometimes whenever we're coming, babies are having a lot of information around the incubator or code, but notification about the research is essential, especially when the intervention is delivered. So that was really helpful to have the code cards on the site. Although from the practice, nursing practice, we changing the incubators, we changing the codes, and this is a piece of additional information which is attached. So we have to make sure that this is attached to the right person. So we're placing also the payee sticker with the date of the name and the date of birth on this code card to make sure that it's assigned to the right patient. So this new way of communication to gain parental agreement is widely used by the medical professionals. We tend to do it, for the instance, when we're asking them to introduce donor milk, formula milk, or immunization. So we're having this verbal communication with parents when we're asking them for the permission. So most important for us is the communication. So it's all about the communication and the wordings we are using. So we might move to the next slide, please, at the same time. So we are comparing two methods of practice, which are part already of the neonatal care across the country, in the world and in UK. So this is not the novel treatment, and it's really important to highlight to the parents that this is nothing experimental. Some parents are using this wording, and it's a little bit for us, asking us for the more input just to explain where we are standing and what we are trying to do for the baby. Especially when we are approaching parents sometimes to give the antenatal counseling before the baby is born, and that might come in place when you are dealing with the FEED1 study, when we're trying to get the consent before the baby is born. They quite often asking what else is happening in the research field. So we are giving them the information at hand, but most of the time later when the baby is on the unit, we are delivering the rest of the information, or sometimes repeating, because parents are quite stressful at that time and having a lot of information given by the neonatal team. So we have to repeat them sometimes a few times. So this would allow us to find out which practice is more beneficial for the babies who are born so early. And as our action follows evidence-based practice, we are gathering evidence to answer parental questions. And this is about how we're delivering the information about the WIT trial. So we're giving them a time to read this leaflet and asking them and giving them information that we are at hand. So whenever there any question they're having, please get in touch with us. We are going to come back to you as well, because it all depends from the trial design. So for the window time when the parents are having, just to give us the information back, what they think about that, whether they're having any kind of question, or they are having any doubts, or they need an additional information, we are there for them. So the record is essential, as I did mention, and that's what we learned from the WIT trial, especially when there is a lot of staff rotating within 24 hours a 7 on the neonatal unit. And this is the point of references. So parents at the time of admission are quite emotional, sometimes anxious, overloaded with the information we are providing to them. Stuff which is so obvious to us is new to them, so we have to be patient as well. And some mothers might be still on the medication when the baby is delivered. So this is the moment where we are trying to give them a time and make the record, so we can have a point of references whenever the next team is coming and asking whether the leaflet was delivered. So this is essential part of our practice. And speaking about benefits, challenges, yes, thank you. So it's simplifying model of obtaining research consent. There's no more papers, and that's what we are trying to move away from in the electronic patient record as well. We don't have to do any copies for parents, which is much more efficient and easier. And every neonatal staff member is able to provide this information, as Chris mentioned, so no GCP training is requirement for the staff member apart from the PI. But we are delivering on our side training for every single new member who is coming to the neonatal unit. And they are both doctors and nurses. They are having that session on the induction. And also we are doing a training once a week, just to be for them whenever there is some kind of QI session, and make sure that every staff member is understanding the concept and know the study objectives. We also find that parents are feeding back to us that it's benefits for them to be involved in the decision. That is very welcome, and they feel included in the baby care from the beginning. Some challenges, obviously, with human-to-human interaction. Sometimes poor communication might happen, sometimes lack of record if the staff is forgetting to add that to the system. So that's what we also find out. And we're trying to overcome that with electronic patient record where we set up the draft, and every staff member is having that on hand. So it's just a simple copy and paste option for them, and add the details, whether they were just reading the leaflet and when they received and what circumstances. As I said, safe practice is extremely important. So staff rotation, that's why we are trying to keep this communication on the high level. Timing for the parents, stress factor is quite often taking priority. So we just have to give them a little bit of time to digest this information, come back to them, or repeat the information again. But there are some parents who are really open and there's no problem with at all, especially parents who had the babies on the neonatal unit. So it all depends from the background and some experience. It might be some hesitation, that's obviously understandable, but we are here to help them and go through that process. And so we might have also some undecided parents, and those are going to come into the group where we're needing a little bit more of effort to explain the study. It could be that we also had experience with parents who went into the disagreement when mom was saying yes, dad was saying no, and vice versa, or parents who declined later. But later came to back and asked whether the baby can be back on the study. So it all comes to the point when the peer support is having quite significant impact on parents. And obviously we do know this is happening on the neonatal unit when the parents are talking to other parents and they're getting kind of creating informal groups and supporting each other. And quite often that might be also the case that when one baby is parents withdrawing the baby from the study, the other parents are coming to the same decision, but they actually not really justify that based on the baby condition. So this is the time when we're sitting with them and explaining that again. And obviously we are open for any kind of discussion, and we do understand that this experience might change along the baby journey on the neonatal unit. And some barriers, so it could be the minimal or lack of knowledge, staff about the projects and parents about the research as well. So we came to the situation when we know that parents are having any kind of medical background. It's usually very easy to get the baby on the study, but other parents, they might just need a little bit more time and information. The language barriers, but we are lucky just to have now on neoGASTRIC the translation into two basic languages, and we also quite widely rely on the staff who is from different countries and working on our units to help us with explanation. Communication barriers that might also came to place where we cannot really get parents for the different reasons that they want to be part of the research, but that's absolutely included in the percentage of parents who are gonna be not participating in research. Time pressure, as I said, that could be the barrier because we're asking them just to make that decision as soon as possible, but obviously the baby condition change, and they're more kind of open for sometimes looking to listen and get this information delivered by the doctors rather than the nurses or the local PI of the study. It all depends. So we're using all the variation, and everyone is different, and we do appreciate that. So limited research facility, someone mentioned that already on this call, and that's absolutely true. Some of the units, they don't have delegated people to do the research, and it's everything relying heavily on the medical staff. So it's a great opportunity for this associate PI scheme or nursing team, delegated senior staff, or the new doctors who are coming on the rotation, who are aiming to gain a little bit more insight into research, just to get them to stand as the study lead. And we quite often encouraging them just to be giving them certificates of collaboration, and that is going to also work for the benefits, so they can add that to their own professional portfolio. Sometimes the barriers might be also kind of like slim cohort at the time, so we're having less admission at the specific time of the cohort we are targeting of the babies born below, and we are also surgical unit, so we have to take into account that we are going to have surgical babies coming first, so we are having limited numbers for a period of time because the surgical patient stays with us for a while, so we are having this capacity. The priority of the capacity is going to be for surgical babies, but that's only our local experience, which might not be in place for any other hospitals. And some standards. So obviously, as a medical professional, we are providing the best standards of care and the treatment. We are open, honest, and transparent. Parents of every eligible baby is approached, and the research studies are introduced to them. And as I mentioned before, we are having in line few of the studies. And as Chris also added, parents are very open. And sometimes we do know that we had experience that they decline with study, but for example, they approach us for dolphin study. So we do respect their decision, and we are here to support them in trying to collaborate. As we all know about the family integrated care, they are partners in care, and that's what we were trying to do and how we are trying to approach them. And can I have the next slide, please? And I will close that with the recommendations. So there's more online resources for you or other members of staff if they wish to watch some other additional videos on how to obtain the opt-out consent from very experienced colleagues from Australia, the second line. And also we are having this upcoming study, which is going to be based on opt-out model and neoGASTRIC. We are here for today, and also base study, which is coming very soon as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Isa. Fantastic. There's a note in the chat about neoClear, which had a consent prompt guidance sheet, which I do remember as being really, really fantastic. So that's a really good idea. Some of that is in some of these other documents here, but that's excellent, and we should probably try and develop one of those.
And I fortunately sit next to the trial manager that used to work on neoClear, so I will be here after this meeting.
Such an enormous amount of neonatal trial knowledge at the end.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Laura.
Oh, am I on there?
Yeah.
Hi, sorry, it's Joe with Laura.
Oh,
can
hi.
you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can't see you, but we can hear you.
Oh, all right, I was trying to hide. We'll show off. Can I sorry, I know she's just gone through it, but in the past we've done opt-out studies, but it's been mainly to collect data. So I know you mentioned a pack. We have an admission pack on our neonatal unit that contains a lot of information, and we've always put the form in there, but we do realise that parents may not even read half the stuff that's in that information pack, although it's documented on Badger that the parents have received it. I don't actually know that they read it. So are you saying to us that, is that enough that we're giving it to them? They have to take responsibility to read the pack, or are we supposed to go before we even consider randomising, saying, have you had an opportunity to read over the leaflet? Is this something that we can move forward with? What approach are we using here?
So the REC committee were clear that they didn't want to see us kind of make sure we specifically asked and spoke to every family. So they didn't want us to do a kind of opt-in consent without a consent form, if you see what I mean. So from a REC point of view, they're happy that if the posters are up in parent-facing areas and parents are given the information, then that is sufficient. I think what most people are doing, and what we tend to do at Chelsea, is that we will also mention the trial to parents when we speak to them. Certainly, you know, there's often several conversations in that first day or so with families. So we'll just mention that the trial's there, there's some information in the pack, and that it's just comparing things that are being done routinely anyway, and that this is a kind of low risk trial, a low risk study in which we want to improve care for babies in the future. With, you know, just a very quick explanation, as Isa mentioned there. But from a REC point of view, they're very clear that as long as the parents have had the information, they can opt out of the trial at that point.
Okay.
So the answer is a kind of hybrid answer, I'm afraid, just in terms of, and you know, and I think we're all aware, aren't we, that some families are quite different from other families, and you know, there are some situations where, you know, you're sure the parents haven't understood it. So, for example, if they clearly have complete inability to understand English written information, then in that situation we wouldn't randomise them into the trial if we feel that we haven't been able to communicate the trial with them. And you know, and if we don't have information in the language that's relevant to them, and we can't get an interpreter, and you know, we're really struggling to communicate with them, then we just wouldn't enrol them in the trial. Or if the parents, you know, haven't been able to come over, for example, then clearly we haven't been able to communicate with them, and we wouldn't enrol those babies in the trial either. So, you know, I think you have to, there's a degree to which we can formalise this, but at the end of the day, it is in part down to your judgment as clinicians and
Okay.
research team. I hope that's answered it as much as we can. Isa, do you want to add anything to that? Sorry.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Laura. That's really important aspect. We are just having also a little bit of discussion how to make sure, how we can just make sure that the parents are actually informed about that study. But saying that, and this also coming back to this family integrated care approach, that if they are partner in care, whatever is given to them, it's their responsibility to read it. We can't do for them. So we just asking them whether there's anything they don't understand or they have time. If they didn't, and they're sitting next to the baby, we're asking them, encouraging them to have the time to read. It's just few pages, it's nothing really. And I can quite often going through with them, just to explaining the specific parts. So yeah, they sometimes needing a time, but most of the time when they feel that we are trying to support them and they're having that support, we do have parents who are coming and saying, yeah, I get the chance to read it. Sometimes they're just asking to have a little bit more time to discuss with the partner, but that's absolutely the case. We can allow them and give this window opportunity for them. But yeah, we do record that they receive the leaflet, not that they read it, because we cannot really justify that, whether they have time to read it and when.
Okay, thank you. That's right.
That's great. And there's a couple more questions on the chat that I'll just zip through quickly, and then I'll come to Sharon and Narendra, if that's all right. Are we monitoring PIS given such as the numbered PIS, or do we just document it in the notes EPR? So if you could just document it that the parents have had the information and that they've been given it, that's plenty. Could BadgerNet provide a prompt admission for participating sites? We're exploring that at the moment. As you know, BadgerNet have changed provider, so owner. So it's slightly more complicated now, as it's now run by a big company. But we are looking to see if we can integrate that. So that would be so that babies who are eligible would just get flagged. So it says this baby's eligible for neoGASTRIC, which I think would be great. We've done that with wheat and it works really well. So yeah, that's the plan. Naz has asked about antenatal consent. So we can't take antenatal consent, if that makes sense. But we aren't getting them to sign a form anyway. But yeah, you can absolutely give them information antenatally on the impending delivery and explain that this is a trial that's going on. That's a really fantastic thing. We'd really like people to do that if possible. Yeah. And can the leaflet electronically be given to mother via BadgerNet? Again, we're exploring this with BadgerNet. So what we'd like to do with BadgerNet is to have a flag that says this baby's eligible, and also have the opportunity to print your local information sheet out just through a click, a bit like we've done with the wheat trial. I'm not sure about giving the leaflet electronically to mother via the BadgerNet. I know there is a parent portal type thing, so I can explore that too. That's a really good suggestion. When we hear back from CleverMed about that, I'll ask them. And yeah, another question about approaching antenatally. Yes, please do. Absolutely give them information beforehand. Sharon.
Yeah, hello, good morning. Just going back to what the previous question was about our moral viewpoint on have our parents had the information or not. We're currently taking part in the wheat trial, and we've had lots and lots of issues about this opt-out consent process that on the face of things seems very easy. We get a lot of our babies are transferred in from our sort of outlying areas, so our parents don't come to the unit. And we have another issue about not being able to catch parents. So I can spend a whole week trying to catch a set of parents. So it's this kind of moral dilemma of, yes, we can include it in the parent pack, and we've had it with wheat where these babies, we have given the information leaflet, we have randomized the babies, and we've gone to speak to parents about it, and they say, oh, I had no idea about that. And that then brings up its own issues that we're then doing things to people's babies without them understanding it. Does that make sense? So it's kind of this, how do we all sit morally with this? And I don't think there's a right answer, but we've had issues basically.
Yeah, no, and I get that. I accept that's yeah, is a challenge, and I guess that's why we've gone for the approach that Isa outlined, which is we give information to all the parents, but we do try and have that communication with them as well, recognizing that this is a challenge. And as you say, there's some families where they can't be there, so they can't consent, they can't receive the information, so we wouldn't randomize them in that situation. I mean, I think the point to mention is the reason that we're doing it in the trials like wheat and neoGASTRIC is because these are trials looking at practices that are variable anyway. So people's babies are going to get one of these two practices in the UK, depending on which hospital they're born at and which doctor and nurse looks after them. All we're doing is formally randomizing that decision rather than it being done rather arbitrarily by the kind of person or the place a baby's being looked after. There's no new treatment here, and that's why there is this slightly different approach to consent there. And I appreciate that what we don't do, and the reason this becomes an issue is because we don't explain any of this to parents, do we? When we have a practice that's variable across the country, and a lot of what we do is variable across the country, we don't explain to parents that actually we don't know whether to stop feeds or not when a baby has a blood transfusion. And some people do and some people don't, and about half of people do and half of people don't. And within this hospital, some consultants do and some consultants don't. We don't explain that uncertainty to parents. because we'd be doing it all the time, and I'm not sure parents would really appreciate it, but that's what we're kind of forced to do when we put something in the context of a trial. And that's part of the paradox, really, in the fact that if we want to try and learn what the best approach is, we have to randomize it, which then introduces all of these additional challenges to the process. So yeah, I completely take your point. There's no right or wrong answer. Opt-out consent raises some challenges in the same way that opt-in consent clearly raises quite a lot of challenges as well. And I think moving away from signed forms is a good thing. And I understand why within the week pilot, it was often operationalized as a kind of opt-in, but without a signed consent form, which I think, we're trying to temper that a little bit and make it less formal. But, sites will have to do what they feel is appropriate and operationalize it in the way that they feel it's appropriate. I think one thing that came across really clear was that parents like the idea of not having to sign what felt like a legal document, and staff and clinicians thought about as well. So I hope that helps, but yeah, no, completely accept the points you're making. Narendra.
Thank you, Chris. I think you touched both my questions partly. Just want to clarify about this language barrier and the opt-out. As you know, Hamilton, we have about 10–15% who can't understand or read English or speak English. So what other language parent information sheet is available? One. Number two, you have very good experience with the VEET trial and opt-out consent. Do you have any experience from the wider centers case ending with the complaints or parents arguing about we were not aware, not just verbally telling, just ending up in a big issue in writing?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So in terms of the number of languages, obviously it costs quite a lot of money to translate things into other languages, to get them back translated, so to make sure and print it all out and all those kind of things in order to make it really accessible. But we are keen to make the trial as accessible as possible. So we've gone for the 10 most common languages across the UK. I don't know what that list is, and we're in the process of translating them. So hopefully some of them will align with the common languages in your area. I mean, the challenge is, as everybody here knows, is that often within hospitals now, there are many, many languages that people speak rather than just being one or two. Elizabeth, have you got a list? Do you want to say or?
I don't have the list here. Michaela has a list. You may be able to share in a minute, or we can send it round. It's actually based on the top 10 languages. Also, when we did the feasibility, we asked sites to tell us which languages were the most common. So we tried to match up the two. And so, as you say, there is going to be only 10. And the information sheets and posters and things we're hoping to get translated into those. But there is the opportunity to still use things like language line, things like that within your sense, however you do translation within different units. That's still a possibility if that's available to you.
Yeah, and and I think most people would be having a conversation in the first 24 hours with families via language line or some other approach. And what we certainly did within WEET and within the week pilot and the main trial is, if you're having that conversation, if there's an opportunity at the end of it, explain that there's also research going on in the unit, and mention that the study's going and see how parents feel about that. But yeah, if you can't communicate with them, if it's then clearly they shouldn't, they haven't had the information and they shouldn't be enrolled in the trial. So it's worth just remembering that. It's not every baby that has to be in the trial, and we accept that there'll be some that you can't for lots of different reasons. Luckily, the population of babies less than 34 weeks is large. So, there's something like 13,500 babies born across the UK every year. So there should be plenty of babies, even if there are some where, for lots of different reasons, they're not appropriate to be in the trial or they can't be in the trial.
Thanks, Chris.
Helen.
Hiya. I just wanted to touch on what you said and that Sharon said about the moral sort of issue, because I was very much in agreement with what both of you said. So we did OptiPrem. It wasn't for very long. I remember partaking in that, and that was opt-out, and it was a number of years ago now, but all we did for that one was put posters up and put the PIL in the admission pack. And like one of the other nurses said earlier, sorry, I forgot her name, that, you know, we can't guarantee that that's been read because there's so much information there. And I felt a little bit uncomfortable with that, in the fact that it wasn't followed up. And, you know, we've had much more experience since then. And one of the things that I think we have bi-monthly research meetings on the NICU, and that's where we introduce all of our studies, so either the ones ongoing, but also ones in setup, and also ones in the pipeline. And we have a real discussion as a team about whether or not we should participate. And one thing that really came out of that for me was a few years ago, when we had very different difference of opinion for participating in Feed 1. And we spoke about it for probably 2 or 3 meetings. Now, if you think they're bi-monthly, it was like 6 months down the line, and there was still lots of questions. And, you know, I felt a bit awkward, but at the same time, when you're running the study or you're trying to deliver, I think you need buy-in from absolutely everyone for it to be beneficial and for it to work. Otherwise, you will have problems with recruitment, like you say, depending on who the consultant is of the week and if they're interested or whatever. So it got to a point where it was like, look, we either say yes or nay. And so we said nay for that one, unfortunately. But I think what I'm trying to get at is one thing that we also noticed from experience is when we give a clinical update, we then introduce the research. And we always, as I'm sure a lot of us all do, is we try and use first names. So if baby's got a first name, you know, and parents have got a first name, we use their first names, and gauge sort of their body language. So it's not only what they say verbally, but also, you know, non-verbal communication. And so if, depending on the introduction and obviously how well baby's doing, is whether it's the right time point to mention research. And if it isn't, it's still, you know, whether it's enough to say, you know, I can see you sort of distressed in a minute, just to let you know that we do research, and that when it's the right time, you know, we can always reapproach and rediscuss. So yeah, I just think it's that empathy and level of understanding, and for them to realize that you're on, that, you know, you do care, and their baby is not just you're interested because they are eligible for a research study, you know, even. And I've had times when parents have said no, and I felt really obliged when I've seen them again to ask how baby's doing, because, you know, you're not just interested because they were part of research. So sorry, that was real waffle, but kind of hopefully we're all on the same page. I think ultimately buy-in from everyone and all having the same approach. And I think as part of training, I would probably be saying, this is the process that I think we should be taking, and try and have agreement from everyone from that perspective.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's really clear. You know, I think you're right. Within trials, we want to kind of make everything like absolutely like you just do this and protocolize everything. But some things, you know, they can't be completely protocolized. So you have to have a mixed approach that works well for some families and not for others. But you know, I think the thing to remember for neoGASTRIC is that in a lot of the sites we surveyed, and I think Oliver mentioned it earlier, there's huge variation within the site. So these babies are getting often. Some days they're having aspirates measured, some days they're not having it measured, some, you know, depending on which consultant's on the ward round or which nurse is looking after the baby on that day. So at the moment, they're getting very random, well, not random, they're getting very arbitrary care. And what we're trying to do is formally randomize it so that we can learn and work out which one's better. And I think that's a good way to explain it to parents.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Yeah, having that. And I think if we had that care prompt, so I think you get people that, like yourself, that are so used to doing research and work in the field and familiar, and are used to speaking to parents about consent, whereas you get, obviously we say we have this rotation of staff, and you might have, you know, more postgrad doctors that are more you know, sort of ST2, ST3, that maybe haven't had much research experience. And consenting for research is very different from consenting for a clinical procedure. So like you say, it's about sharing with the parents that, you know, this is okay, this is safe. And really what we're trying to determine is, you know, depending where you are in the country, there are different practices going on, and we just want to ideally determine the best one for the babies to provide the best care and inform our practice. And yeah, completely.
And I didn't mention, Narendra had another second point, didn't you, Narendra, which I didn't answer, which is, have we had any more formal complaints from the week pilot or the week trial that's ongoing? And the answer is no, we've had no formal complaints along those lines, which I think is good. And obviously, if we do, we'll take this very seriously and update you. There's a couple of other quick questions in the chat. One is about continuing care sites. We are looking to set up continuing care sites. That's a huge piece of work for the trial team, as you can probably imagine. The good thing about neoGASTRIC is because it's includes babies less than 34 weeks gestation, actually pretty much any site can be part of it. And it may be that sites feel they want to be part of it as a recruiting and a continuing care site, even the smaller special care units, because then they can kind of get some of the benefit of recruiting rather than just the burden of being a continuing care site. But we're really happy to talk to units in your network about whether they might want to be part. But we're very keen to have units as continuing care sites, and hopefully it'll be much less onerous for them than in Dolphin, for example, whether we have to administer a treatment as they go home. Sujoy mentions about he feels personally should give the information leaflet on a one-to-one basis prior to randomization. And then once we do this, perhaps we do not need to chase. And the information overload or just a poster may be a valid argument for parents to say that they didn't know about the trial. And I think that's completely fair. And I think we probably do that in most cases at Chelsea and Westminster. We make sure we give them the information sheet separate than just a big bag of stuff. So there's also research, here's some information about it. And I think that's really appropriate. And that's a good way to kind of toe the line between the two. And then there's a question about when realistically do you think the recruitment would start? Well, hopefully as soon as possible. We would really hope, we're hoping to get the final amendment signed off. We're setting up sites in this next couple of weeks. So we hope that we can start recruitment in May, I think is the intention. And certainly the NIHR are very keen for us to get cracking with recruitment. So any help that you can. Sites that are keen and are nearly ready and poised to go, please get in touch and we will try and prioritise setting you up as a site sooner rather than later. We've had a couple of sites. So Naz, who's been very engaged on the chat, we're looking forward to setting you up as a site imminently. Thank you. Isa, gosh, just jump in, Isa, sorry.
Thank you so much. Just to add, and thank you very much for the nursing voice, because this is really important. And we do have also the same kind of problems which you're trying to find out the best solution. And as Chris mentioned, it's not always the case. We have to look at individuality. So sometimes we're calling parents, we are updating them over the phone. We're just mentioning that dad was here, so he's going to bring the leaflet and I'm going to call you next day or following day. And sometimes there's a case that we're trying to combine that with the clinical updates just to make sure that we're not stressing parents just to calling them for the research purposes. But we do know also this is not going to be the case for every single baby who is admitted to the neonatal unit. Coming with the information who our parents are overloaded, we move our admission pack to the electronic version, so they're receiving QR code. So basically we are only standing with the paper version of research, and that's making it a little bit more easier because then we know that the leaflet was given is attached to the admission pack on every single code. And I saw also the question about the numbering the parental information leaflet. I think is if that's convenient for you to navigate how many you just were given and to whom, we're using the screening log, patient screening log for the research, and that's helping us to notify as well with the tick that this parents received the leaflet and is reflected on the patient EPR. So that's some kind of things we are going through now, but obviously it's a learning process. So if there will be anything coming later in the line, and we hopefully we're going to improve that approach because more studies of opt-out model consent is coming up. So we have to find a better solution. So thank you very much for that questions.
Thanks, Isa. And I take your point about this being a really important nursing led study and the nursing voice being critical. So on that note, I'm going to stop talking now and hand over to Marie. I also have to leave slightly early before the end of this, so I will try and hang around, but I might have to leave if the questions continue, and hopefully the rest of the trial team will be able to take over. We have to leave about 11:15. Thank you very much. Marie, over to you.
Right, thanks, Chris. Thank you, everybody, for joining in today. It's been really interesting, and I'm picking up some really good hints already as to what we need to include in our package. We have developed a package. This was actually written by a nursery specialist who was new to research at the time and a medical student. And we deliberately went with that approach because we wanted to make sure we got the target audience right. And we realised that a lot of people, especially with the volume of babies that we're going to be recruiting, a lot of the staff won't have had that much input with research studies. So we wanted to put together something that would work for them. This isn't the package that's in front of you. This is just a snapshot of some of the slides. What we really wanted from you now is to say what is going to be useful to you all in terms of what training you would like us to provide for you to give to your staff in order to get buy-in for neoGASTRIC and get people understanding what's happening with it. What we've included so far, so I say we've got a bit about the background, why the trial's needed, what evidence there is, or how the lack of the evidence, what happens if you don't, if you're starting feeds because of gastric residuals, and all of that information. We've got slides on what happens if we don't measure, what the concerns about that people may have about not measuring gastric residuals. We cover eligibility very briefly. We cover randomization, but what we don't do is we talk about who gets randomized, but not how the randomization process is done. So that might be something that you think would be useful to include. And then we go on the intervention itself and talk about the safety and input and what to do if you've got large residuals, or what process do you follow, what happens, how do you identify feeding intolerance if you're not measuring gastric residuals, and then a section on compliance and how are we looking at that, which is obviously something somebody's already brought up today already. This package itself, as it stands, is about 17 slides. We tried recording it and it worked out to about 15 minutes long. What we'd like to know, and if you can put in the comments, or if you want to join in or put your hands up or just join in, chip in, that would be great, is would you like that for your units? Do you want something that we record that you can play to the unit? Would you like it to be shorter? Sort of what's an ideal length of time? I mean 15 minutes doesn't seem too long, but if you're trying to capture people on the unit, maybe we need to have something, we could have like 3 5-minute sessions or a 10-minute session, something like that might be more helpful. Would you prefer if we just give you the slides and you do your own sessions? What about, do we need anything for parent education? We've recently started with Dolphin and discovered how useful it is to train the parents very quickly how to give Dolphin, and we're getting much better buy-in from the staff giving the Dolphin because the parents are the ones that are educating them, but obviously they would need a little bit extra. And I'm also thinking in terms of parents may be friends with somebody else on the unit whose baby's in the other arm of neoGASTRIC, and what happens when they start talking about things, if they start talking about things. And I know that they do discuss from Wheat and from Dolphin, that parents do actually discuss the trials with one another and what's happening. So I wonder if that's something that might be important. Something else we'd suggested was having regular meetings like we're doing with a lot of the studies now. So we perhaps have a Zoom call once a month or something, or at a time frame that you think would be useful, so you can dial in and discuss any issues that you have or any good practices that you're finding. Is there anything else that you'd like in more detail? It seems to me maybe opt-out consent might be something that we could perhaps look at. It's not specifically for this trial, but it looks like it might be useful, sort of little training session for somebody. Randomization, so particularly if we're going to have individual logins, it's always useful as to how that goes. We've had a few issues at Leicester with the Wheat trial with that. Not actually knowing who's been randomized, because you don't find that out when it comes back to you. So there's things that we haven't thought about with that, and the same compliance and what we're doing about that, how important it is to keep babies in the same arms. I think we said we're going to put together FAQ sheets anyway. I don't know if there's going to be any guidance sheets and anything else you can think of, and I will shut up. I've seen things popping up. So What have we got?
Maria, I can see lots of comments in there saying a lot of people would like the video, and it being on. It sounds like a combination of all of the suggestions. A lot of people quite like the video because it's available 24 hours. And somebody said, yeah, short and long materials. I wonder, I think your idea of having a separate opt-out one maybe, so people can just review that one. Maybe we have it like a modular thing so people can just look at the bits they want.
Yeah, that's a good one about the feed one as well. And I know we've got one for surf on as well. That's about 3 minutes. And I think if maybe things like that. Is it you're thinking in Oliver? Are you thinking for the feed one? Is that for parents specifically? Yes, you've put that. Sorry, yes. Read the rest of it.
It's for parents, but actually it's brilliant. It's brilliant for the staff to watch. So like lots of our parent focus facing things, they're actually really good for staff. You know, like NNAP. Your Baby's Care is targeted at parents, but actually it's the perfect summary for most staff who haven't got time.
Yeah, lovely. So, and do you think anyone in terms of length? I mean, I say 15 minutes didn't seem very long when we were doing, but actually having seen sessions on the unit and when we're trying to capture people, I do wonder if maybe we should chop it up and put it into like 3 5-minute sessions. So that people can, I mean, you could have a link to it, but so people can dip in and out. I know with Aztec, we had a 5-minute session on how to prepare the IMP, for instance, and that was something that we could just about grab people for 5 minutes and say, here, watch this. And they seem to retain it as well. So would that be okay, do you think, people? Anyone want to speak up?
I can't see any nodding because
yes,
I think that sounds like a good idea. But yeah, a few thumbs up coming up and some some comments. So I think that would be a really good suggestion to have so maybe 2 or 3 5-minute ones that people can then choose which ones to watch, or could maybe watch one as a team and then the others later in their own time or something like that. We can make them available for people.
Yeah, lovely. Right, we can do all of that then, can't we?
But it looks really nice. A couple of people have said they'd like to see it, so I think we probably need to do a little bit more work on it, and then we will have that again up on our website so people can look at it, and we will be sharing that when we come to the site initiation visits too. We'll be sharing that with people.
Yeah, lovely.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marie.
Thank you.
And nice to see. Thank you so much, Marie and Izzy. You guys have been absolutely fantastic and instrumental to getting the trial to this point, along with our other nursing co-investigators of Mandy, also up in Middlesbrough, and Live On Tune in Liverpool. So thank you very much. I am going to hand over to you, Elizabeth, if that's all right.
Shall I go, or do you need to go?
I'm going to have to leave it during this talk. So just before I hand over to you, I'll just say thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time out this morning to join this meeting. It's fantastic to see so many people interested, and I think it's just a testament to the strength of interest in neonatal research, especially clinically driven research like this trial in the UK and Australia. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody, and I look forward to working with you on this trial, the biggest trial in neonatal care, hopefully in a few years' time.
Thank you, Chris.
And Chris, I'm hoping to go less than 15 minutes. So if you're staying on, then great. If not, thank you for running today. So just to go through a few more things about the site training, we will be doing a site initiation visit. We are doing these via Zoom now. I know a few people have asked whether this was this SIV, but we will be giving a lot more information at that meeting. And we'll be doing that a lot closer to when you're ready to open the site. So when we've got approvals either in or getting close, we'll come out and do that. At the moment, we're booking people in for a half-day Zoom. We're expecting it to take a little bit less than that, but that's kind of what we're aiming for. And at that, we'll just go through a lot more information about, we'll show you the randomization system, the CRF, all the different guidance sheets, and just go into an awful lot more detail than we've gone through today of the sort of practicalities of running the trial. There will be some separate training, so CRF training, case report form training. We do use Open Clinica. I know many of you work on other NPU trials and have used that before. So if you've already been trained, you don't need to do that again. And as long as it's a recent study using the same version of Open Clinical, we should be okay to carry that across. And the same thing applies. We've got a randomization system that we'll need to do a little bit of training online for. Some of these things have been mentioned today already, but I just wanted to show you some of the other tools that we're going to provide to the site. So we do have a COT card. So that's the do measure gastric residual volume COT card. There is the same one for do not in a different color. It does have the QR code linking to the study website. So if parents see that near the cot, they can see what it's about and follow that. And there is space for the baby's either name or study number to go on there, whatever you would prefer to do. These will be provided to you around the time of site initiation visits, and we will be laminating them, so you'll be able to reuse them if you want. And then the other thing we're providing is a label for the tube, and we don't actually have one, but this is a real Blue Peter job here, that it's going to be sort of a sticker that looks like that, and it will fold over the tube so that it's on the tube itself, just as another reminder, either saying no GRV or with GRV. You can place that where you feel appropriate for its checking. It's just another sort of thing to highlight which arm of the trial they're in. And then we've got various stickers. I've just shown one of them here. I know most people are electronic records these days, but for people who are paper or want any other kind of stickers like that, they're just to stick everywhere, just to remind people this is a neogastric baby. We will be providing, a few people have already asked me, we will be providing an investigator site file. It's an electronic ISF. We will be providing that to you again near the time of starting. We also provide what we call a document box, so a metal box about so size with any kind of paper information that you need. So all the information sheets will be in there, the translated information sheets as well, paper versions of them. We also provide guidance sheets. Again, I think these have been mentioned a few times today. I've just put an example of one up there about screening eligibility. So just something that will explain a little bit more about what you need to do, that you can just pull out the document box or have on the unit, whatever you prefer to do. So just some instructions for how to use that. Already been mentioned, the translated information sheets, and the website, I think, is a real key tool for you to use. Everything will be on there, all the training items, all the things like the guidance sheets, the information sheets will all be uploaded onto there. So you'll have things in the ISF, you'll have things on the website, and you also have things in the document box for you to use. And then in terms of next steps, sort of the last thing we're going to talk about today. So we do have sites out there at various different stages. So we have some sites we've already sent the local information pack we've been working through with yourselves and your R&D departments, and are getting very close to getting the sites open. We're just going to keep working with you to progress those. I know some are waiting on contracts. I am chasing the contracts up regularly. And we progress to something called a green light form, which is just basically a checklist to check we've got everything in place before we can open your site. So we have a group of sites that are there. We have some where R&D departments have let us know they're not quite ready to receive the LIP, and we won't send that formally until departments are ready. So as soon as departments are ready, they'll let us know, and we'll send the local information pack over to them. If you haven't heard for a while, we might just send a couple of emails, or if you haven't heard from us and are ready to get it, just let us know. And then we do have some sites that have come on board after the main application. So once we get the amendment we've already talked about today, the protocol amendment through, we're going to submit a new list of sites in that amendment. And once that's approved, then we can start sending local information packs out to you as well. I think that was my last piece of info. Oh no. So yeah, I think I've said most of this stuff now, but once the site is ready, we'll get the localized documents out to you. We'll work on signing the contract, set up the site initiation visit, send out the ISF and the document box, get ready, open a site, and then we can get recruiting. That's our goal. And as you've mentioned already, we're really hoping to set our first few sites up in the next couple of weeks and start recruiting in May.